Why was a janitor cleaning blood-red training mats at 2 in the morning? That's what Sergeant Carter Boy wanted to know. He stood in the center of Training Facility 7, muscular frame blocking the overhead lights, casting shadows across the woman kneeling with a mop. Around him, instructors had stopped mid-drill. Their attention snapped to the confrontation like magnets to metal. Martha Hayes didn't look up. At 47, with silver threading through her tied-back hair, wearing a janitor's uniform 2 sizes too large, she simply wrung out the mop. Continued cleaning. The only acknowledgement she gave was a slight pause, barely a heartbeat. Then she resumed her methodical strokes. "I'm talking to you." Carter's voice rose, echoing off concrete walls lined with weapons racks and tactical gear. 3 months he'd watched her, always cleaning, always listening, always in the corner with those eyes, those judgmental eyes. Lieutenant Blake Connor laughed from his position near the heavy bags. At 31, Blake was the facility's golden boy. High scores, good looks, social circle that treated him like royalty. "Carter, leave the cleaning lady alone. She probably thinks Call of Duty counts as combat experience." But Carter's jaw tightened. "No." She shook her head when Foster demonstrated that chokehold sequence. "I saw it, like she knows better." Martha stood slowly, gathering her supplies. Her movements were economical, practiced. The kind of efficiency that comes from muscle memory so deep it's cellular. She met Carter's eyes for the first time. "I need to finish this section before 200 hours, she said quietly. No challenge. No anger, just a statement of fact. But in the next 20 minutes, everything would change. Carter stepped closer, invading the space most people instinctively protect. The crowd grew. 15 instructors now, maybe 20 if you counted the recruits peeking from the equipment room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across faces eager for entertainment. This was Training Facility 7, where late-night sessions ran until dawn, where the best came to sharpen edges already honed to lethal precision. Or so they believed. "You think I didn't notice?" Carter's breath hit Martha's face. Hot, aggressive. "Every time we run drills, you stop cleaning, you watch." He pointed at her face, finger inches from her nose. "Then you shake your head like we're doing it wrong, like some janitor knows better than combat instructors." Blake pushed off from the heavy bag, his tall frame unfolding with casual confidence. The confidence of someone who'd never truly been tested. "Carter, seriously, man, she's probably a veteran's wife or something. Watched hubby clean his rifle a few times and thinks she's tactical." The laughter that followed was designed to cut. Martha's hands tightened on the mop handle, just slightly, just for a second, but the grip was wrong. Too firm, too controlled, the kind of grip you'd use on a carbine. Not a cleaning tool. Carter saw it, his eyes narrowed. "Show me your hands." Martha didn't move. "I said show me your hands, lady." Slowly, Martha set down the mop. Her hands emerged from the oversized sleeves. Calloused, scarred along the knuckles with the kind of strength that doesn't come from mopping floors. The fluorescent light caught a thin white line across her right palm. The kind of scar you get from a blade sliding during close-quarter struggle. Captain Foster Arden approached from the tactical course, boots clicking against concrete with military precision. At 35, Foster was the facility's CQC specialist, a man who'd seen combat in 3 theaters, believed he'd encountered every fighting style worth knowing. His tone was friendly, almost paternal, which somehow made it worse. "Ma'am, I don't want any trouble here, but you've been making my instructors uncomfortable. If you have concerns about our training methods, there's a proper channel for that. A suggestion box in the admin building." The condescension dripped like acid. Martha's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not fear. Recognition, perhaps. The look of someone who'd heard this speech 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different contexts, always from men who thought proximity to danger made them dangerous. "I don't have concerns," Martha said quietly. "I have observations." "Oh, this should be good." Staff Sergeant Jasper Roy materialized from the crowd, thin face twisted into a smirk. At 33, Jasper had perfected the art of the subtle knife. never attacking directly, always undermining with questions that seemed innocent until you realized they weren't. Everyone, the janitor has observations about our training. Maybe we should take notes. Scattered chuckles rippled through the gathering. 23 people now, by Martha's count, all witnesses, all recording this moment in the theater of their minds, storing it as an anecdote to share over drinks. The night the cleaning lady got put in her place, except that wasn't quite the story being written. Near the wait area, Sergeant First Class Iris Mina watched with different eyes. She'd stopped her workout the moment Carter's voice rose. Now she observed with the stillness of a predator, assessing whether to engage. Something about the janitor's posture triggered memories Iris couldn't quite access, like a song you know but can't name. In the corner, Private Aidan Mason felt his stomach clench with second-hand embarrassment. At 19, fresh from basic, he'd learned to keep his head down and mouth shut. But watching this older woman stand alone against a wall of muscle and mockery reminded him of his grandmother. A woman who'd survived things these instructors couldn't imagine, yet never spoke about them. Martha picked up her mop bucket. Water sloshed, breaking the tension like a record scratch. "I'll come back later," she said simply. "No," Carter's hand shot out, gripping the bucket's edge. Water splashed onto the mat, dark drops spreading across the red surface like blood. "You don't get to judge us and then walk away. You want to shake your head at my techniques? Fine. Show me what I'm doing wrong." "Carter," Foster began. "No, Captain, I'm tired of this. 3 months of this woman watching us like we're incompetent children. 3 months of those little headshakes and quiet sighs." He released the bucket, stepping back with his arms spread wide. "So here's your chance, Grandma. Show us how it's really done." The crowd tightened, drawn by the promise of humiliation. Blake pulled out his phone, already angling for the best shot. "This is going to be legendary." Martha stood there, mop handle in one hand, bucket in the other, surrounded by combat instructors who outweighed her, outmuscled her, and in their minds outsmarted her in every way that mattered. The overhead lights buzzed. Someone coughed. The moment stretched like heated glass, ready to shatter. Then Martha set down the bucket again. She straightened, and something changed in the way she held herself. Not dramatic, not obvious, but fundamental, her spine aligned with geometric precision. Her feet positioned themselves at shoulder width, toes pointed forward, weight distributed with mathematical exactness. Her shoulders rolled back half an inch. It was a stance most of them had seen 1,000 times. Parade rest. Perfect. Unconscious. Unthinking. The kind of muscle memory that takes years to build and never fully leaves. Foster's eyes narrowed. Iris Mina's hands slowly lowered from the weight she'd been holding. Aiden's breathing stopped completely, because they all knew, some part of them all knew. This wasn't a janitor who'd watched her husband clean rifles. This was something else entirely. "All right," Martha said. Her voice hadn't changed. Still quiet, still calm, but there was steel underneath now, visible for those who knew how to look. "What would you like me to demonstrate?" Carter's smirk widened. He thought he'd won. "The chokehold sequence, the one you shook your head at. Show me what Foster did wrong." "I'll need a volunteer," Martha said. "I'll volunteer." Blake stepped forward, still holding his phone, still grinning. 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle and ego. "Let's see what Grandma's got." What happened in the next 60 seconds would become legend at Training Facility 7. But not for the reasons Blake expected. Have you ever seen someone move who's forgotten more about combat than you'll ever learn? Martha didn't rush forward, didn't telegraph, didn't waste a single motion. She simply closed the distance between herself and Blake with the efficiency of someone for whom violence isn't performance, it's profession. Blake reached for her, standard aggressive approach, the kind that works on people who panic. Martha wasn't people who panic. Her left hand deflected his reach. Not a slap, not a push. A redirection that used his own momentum against him. Her right hand found his elbow, applied pressure to a nerve cluster most people don't know exists. Blake's arm went numb. His phone clattered to the floor, his smirk vanished, and before his brain could process what was happening, Martha had stepped behind him, her arm wrapped around his neck, not choking, not crushing, just applying precise pressure to the carotid arteries in a blood choke that would render him unconscious in exactly 4 seconds if she continued. She didn't continue. She released him at second 3, stepped back, resumed her neutral stance. The entire sequence had taken maybe 5 seconds. Blake staggered forward, gasping, hand to his throat, eyes wide. The room had gone completely silent. "That's the chokehold sequence," Martha said quietly. "The issue with Foster's demonstration wasn't the technique, it was the setup. You're teaching them to muscle through the position. That works if you're stronger than your opponent, but what if you're not? What if you're a smaller operator facing a larger threat? Then you need leverage, physics, precision over power." Foster stood frozen, his mind rewinding the last 3 months. Every time he demonstrated a technique, every time the janitor had been nearby quietly cleaning, every small headshake he dismissed as ignorance. She hadn't been judging, she'd been assessing. The way a master watches a student, the way experience recognizes inefficiency. "Who are you?" Iris Mina's voice cut through the silence, direct, no nonsense. The question everyone was thinking but afraid to ask. Martha looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them, recognition, respect, the understanding that exists between people who have seen the same darkness and survived. "I'm the night janitor," Martha said, "hired 3 months ago through the civilian contractor service. I clean the training facilities, Monday through Friday, midnight to 6 a.m. "That's not what she's asking." Carter's voice had lost its aggressive edge, replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe fear, because he was starting to understand that he'd just challenged someone he shouldn't have. "Who were you, before the mop, before this?" Martha was quiet for a long moment. You could hear the ventilation system, the distant hum of machinery, the sound of 23 people holding their breath. "I was someone who trained people like you," she said finally. "A long time ago." "How long ago?" Foster asked. "Long enough that most of my students are retired now, or dead." The words landed like stones, heavy, final. Martha picked up her mop bucket. "I really do need to finish this section. The day shift arrives at 600. If the floors aren't clean, they'll complain." "Wait," Jasper stepped forward. The smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "You were military, what branch?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." Martha considered him, saw the genuine question underneath the ego, saw the moment when mockery transformed into curiosity. "Multiple branches," she said. "Over the course of a long career, I trained operators from special forces units worldwide, close-quarter combat, tactical hand-to-hand, survival techniques. I developed curriculum that's still being used in programs you've probably trained in, but that was a different lifetime." "Why are you mopping floors?" Aiden's voice was small, almost childlike. "Because at 19, the world was still supposed to make sense. Legendary trainers weren't supposed to be scrubbing blood off mats at 2 in the morning." Martha's expression softened, just slightly. "Because I needed a job, and this one lets me be invisible. After you've been visible for long enough, invisibility becomes precious." "This is insane." Blake had recovered enough to speak. His voice was hoarse, embarrassed. "You're telling me we've had a special forces instructor working as a janitor for 3 months and nobody knew?" "You knew," Martha said. "You just didn't recognize what you were seeing. People rarely do. They see the uniform, the job title, the surface. They don't look deeper." Carter sat down on the training mat, just sat, like his legs had stopped working. "I challenged you. I threw a glove at you. I called you grandma. He put his head in his hands. "Oh God." "You challenged someone you thought was weak," Martha said, not unkindly. "That's what bullies do. And what you've learned tonight is that strength doesn't always look the way you expect. Sometimes it looks like an older woman with a mop. Sometimes it wears oversized uniforms and works night shifts. Sometimes it stays quiet because it has nothing left to prove. The words hung in the air, a lesson being taught without malice, without ego, just truth, simple and devastating. Foster approached slowly, hands visible, body language non-threatening. "Ma'am, I apologize for my condescension, for my assumptions, for not seeing what was right in front of me." "Apology accepted. Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Why didn't you say anything? 3 months you watched us train, watched us make mistakes. Why stay silent?" Martha's smile was sad, distant. "Because I wasn't here to teach, I was here to hide. Teaching is what killed my—" She stopped, breathed, continued. "Teaching is what I gave up, what I walked away from. I came here for anonymity, a paycheck, a reason to get out of bed, nothing more." "What changed?" Iris asked. "Nothing, everything. I'm still not here to teach. I'm still the night janitor. Tomorrow I'll be back with my mop, and you'll go back to your drills. Tonight was an aberration. Let it be one." But even as she said it, Martha knew it wasn't true. The moment Carter threw that glove, the moment she stood and demonstrated that chokehold, she'd broken her own rules, stepped out of invisibility, revealed herself. And you can't unreveal yourself. Can't return to shadows once you've been seen. The dam had cracked, and she could feel the pressure building behind it. All the knowledge, all the experience, all the years of training and teaching and surviving, pushing forward, demanding release. "What's your name?" Foster asked. Martha hesitated. Names had power. Names created connection. Connection created obligation. Obligation created pain. She'd spent 3 months avoiding all of it, but standing here, surrounded by instructors who'd just seen her in a way she couldn't take back, the lie felt heavier than the truth. "Martha," she said, "Martha Hayes." Foster extended his hand, formal, respectful, a gesture that acknowledged what had just shifted. "Captain Foster Arden, and if you ever decide you want to teach again, even unofficially, my door is open. What you just showed us in 5 seconds was worth more than 5 months of standard training." Martha looked at his hand, at the olive branch being offered, at the door being open to a life she'd sworn to keep closed. She shook his hand, brief, professional. "I'll think about it." But she couldn't, because teaching led to caring, caring led to connection, connection led to loss, and she'd lost enough for 10 lifetimes. Nathan's face flashed in her mind. Her son, her student, her greatest pride and deepest grief. The reason she was mopping floors instead of molding warriors. The reason invisibility had become survival. Martha picked up her mop bucket. The water was dirty now, mixed with sweat from the training mats. She'd need to change it before continuing. The crowd parted as she walked toward the utility closet. 23 people watching her with new eyes, seeing something they'd missed for 3 months, wondering how many other invisible people they'd overlooked, how many other stories they'd dismissed. As Martha disappeared into the closet, Blake picked up his phone from where it had fallen. The video was still recording. He stared at it, then quietly deleted it. Some moments weren't meant to be shared. Some lessons were too personal to become entertainment. Iris Mina stayed long after the others dispersed, watching the training floor, replaying what she'd witnessed. She'd served under female instructors before. Some of the best operators she'd known were women. But this was different. This was mastery so complete it looked effortless. This was decades of knowledge compressed into seconds of demonstration. This was what excellence looked like when it stopped caring about recognition. Around 3 a.m., Martha emerged from the utility closet with fresh water. She resumed cleaning where she'd left off, methodical, efficient, like nothing had happened. Iris almost approached her, almost asked the questions burning in her mind, but something stopped her. Respect, maybe, or understanding that some people needed their invisibility, needed their night shifts and their silence and their grief processed in private. So Iris returned to her workout, and Martha returned to her mopping, and Training Facility 7 returned to its rhythms, but nothing was quite the same, because once you've seen a master, you can't unsee them. Once you've been taught a lesson, you carry it forward. and 23 people had just learned that strength comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's quiet, but it's always there, waiting to be recognized by those wise enough to look beyond the surface. The janitor finished cleaning at 5:47, 13 minutes ahead of schedule. She stored her equipment in the closet, clocked out on the digital system, walked to her car in the pre-dawn darkness, drove home to her small apartment, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and allowed herself to feel the emotions she'd suppressed all night. Anger at being challenged, fear of being exposed, grief at being reminded of who she used to be, and underneath it all a small, dangerous spark, pride. She'd forgotten what it felt like to move with purpose, to demonstrate skill, to see recognition in someone's eyes. For 3 months she'd been invisible, and for 60 seconds tonight she'd been seen, really seen. And part of her, the part she'd been trying to suppress, had liked it. Martha looked at her hands, the same hands that had held Nathan as a baby, taught him his first combat stance, received his folded flag. These hands had built and destroyed, created and grieved, and tonight they'd remembered their original purpose: teaching, protecting, passing knowledge forward. "This doesn't change anything," she whispered to the empty apartment. "Tomorrow I go back to being invisible." But the words felt hollow, because everything had changed. The moment she'd stood and demonstrated that chokehold, she'd opened a door she'd been keeping sealed, and doors, once opened, are very hard to close. Outside, the sun began to rise, a new day beginning. Martha drank her coffee, wondered if she'd still have a job, wondered if she wanted one, wondered if hiding was really living or just another form of dying. She didn't have answers, just questions, and the weight of choices she'd have to make. But for now she was still the night janitor, still invisible, still hiding from a pain too deep to name. Tomorrow she'd decide what came next. Today she'd simply survive, because that's what warriors do. They survive. One day at a time, one breath at a time, one small choice at a time, even when survival feels like the hardest battle they've ever fought. What does it mean when the thing you're running from refuses to stay buried? Martha found out the next night when she arrived for her shift. General David Morrison was waiting in the administrative office, silver-haired, ramrod straight, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. He stood when she entered, extended his hand. "Ms. Hayes, I'm General Morrison, commander of this facility. Do you have a moment?" This was it, the termination meeting, the inevitable consequence of stepping out of invisibility. Martha had prepared herself, had rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd accept it gracefully, move on to another anonymous job in another anonymous place, start over, again. "Of course, General." Morrison gestured to a chair. Martha sat. He remained standing for a moment, studying her with eyes that had spent decades assessing people. "I received some interesting reports about an incident last night, involving you and several of my instructors. I apologize if I overstepped, General. It won't happen again." "Overstepped?" Morrison's eyebrow raised. "Ms. Hayes, you demonstrated in 60 seconds what some of my instructors have been struggling to teach for months. That's not overstepping. That's providing an education they desperately needed." He sat down across from her. "I did some research after I received the reports, made some calls, spoke with some colleagues. Martha Hayes, also known by another name, Instructor Zero." The name hit like a physical blow. Martha hadn't heard it in 3 years, since before Nathan, since before grief, since before everything fell apart. "That's not who I am anymore." "Respectfully, ma'am, I disagree. That's exactly who you are. You're just doing janitorial work instead of the work you were born for." "I wasn't born for anything, General. I learned skills, applied them, then walked away when the cost became too high." Morrison leaned forward. "I read about your son, Nathan Hayes, Special Forces operator, killed in action during a classified operation 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss." The words were formal, professional, but underneath them was genuine sympathy, the kind that comes from someone who's delivered death notifications, who's seen mothers receive folded flags, who understands that some losses don't heal, they just become part of who you are. Martha's throat tightened. Thank you. I understand why you walked away. I do. But I have a facility full of instructors who could benefit from your knowledge. Operators who will deploy into situations where your training could mean the difference between coming home and a folded flag. And I have a night janitor who's arguably the most qualified combat instructor in the Western Hemisphere cleaning floors instead of saving lives. I'm not ready to teach. I'm not asking you to teach. I'm asking you to consult. Unofficially. No title change. No public acknowledgement. You continue your janitorial duties. But when you see something that could be improved, you mention it to me, privately. I implement changes. You remain invisible. Everyone benefits. Martha stared at him. It was a clever compromise, a way to use her skills without exposing her grief, a path back that didn't require commitment, but it was also a trap, because she knew herself, knew that once she started seeing the problems, she wouldn't be able to stop fixing them. That consulting would become teaching. Teaching would become caring. Caring would become connection. And connection would become pain when someone inevitably didn't come home. I don't think that's a good idea, General. Why not? Because I came here to disappear, not to matter. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Ms. Hayes, you disappeared 3 years ago. You've been mopping floors in the middle of the night, avoiding human contact, hiding from your own expertise. You've punished yourself for a loss that wasn't your fault. And I understand that impulse. But Nathan didn't die so his mother could waste her knowledge cleaning up after people who aren't half the operator she is. He died so others could live. And the best way to honor that is to help others live too. The words cut through every defense Martha had built, because they were true, all of them. Nathan had trained under her, learned from her, applied everything she'd taught him, and in his final moments he'd used that training to save his team. His death had meaning, purpose, sacrifice that mattered, while she was mopping floors, hiding, surviving but not living. I need time to think about it, Martha said. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, consider this. Last year, this facility had 17 training-related injuries. This year, we're on track for 24, most of them from techniques that looked good on paper but failed in practice. Operators learning from instructors who have never seen real combat, teaching theory instead of truth. If you consulted, even occasionally, we could cut those numbers in half, maybe more. 17 injuries, 24 projected. Each one a person who might not deploy at full capability, might make a mistake in the field, might not come home. Numbers weren't just statistics. They were sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, people who mattered to someone the way Nathan had mattered to her. What would this consultation look like, practically? Morrison handed her a folder. This is a proposal, non-binding. You review it, decide if it works for you. No pressure, no obligation, just information. Martha opened the folder. Inside was a contract, not employment, consulting services, limited scope, flexible hours, significant compensation, and at the bottom a clause that made her pause. Consultant may terminate agreement at any time for any reason without penalty or explanation. I wanted you to know you could walk away, Morrison said. Whenever you need to, no questions asked, no judgment given. This isn't a trap, it's an opportunity, one you can accept or decline based on what's right for you. Martha read through the contract carefully. It was generous, fair, designed to give her maximum control and minimum obligation. The kind of agreement you offered someone you respected, someone whose skill you valued, someone you didn't want to lose. Can I take this with me? Review it properly. Of course, take as long as you need. In the meantime, you're still our night janitor. Nothing changes unless you want it to. Martha stood. Morrison did too. They shook hands again. Thank you, General, for understanding and for the offer. Thank you for not disappearing completely. The world needs people like you, even when you don't realize it. Martha left the office with the contract folder tucked under her arm. Her shift awaited, floors to clean, mats to scrub, invisibility to maintain, but her mind was elsewhere, processing, calculating, feeling the weight of a choice she'd thought she'd already made 3 years ago. She'd walked away from teaching, from training, from everything that connected her to Nathan's death. And in doing so, she'd walked away from everything that gave her life meaning. That night's shift felt different. Every time she cleaned a mat, she noticed technique flaws in the dried sweat patterns. Every time she emptied a trash bin, she saw discarded training materials with outdated information. Every time she passed a weapons rack, she mentally cataloged the inefficient organization. Her brain wouldn't shut off, couldn't stop assessing, analyzing, identifying problems her experience could solve. This was the curse of mastery. You couldn't stop seeing, couldn't ignore inefficiency, couldn't watch people struggle with problems you knew how to fix. Around 2 a.m., Carter approached her, hesitant, respectful, the arrogance from the previous night completely gone. "Ma'am, do you have a minute?" Martha paused her mopping. "I'm not ma'am, I'm Martha, and yes. I wanted to apologize, again, for last night, for challenging you, for disrespecting you. I was out of line." "You were, but apology accepted. We've already moved past it." "Have we, though?" Carter's face was troubled. "Because I keep thinking about what you said, about seeing the uniform instead of the person, about assumptions. And I realized I do that all the time, with everyone. Judge people based on surface details, never look deeper, and I don't want to be that person." Martha studied him, saw genuine remorse, the kind that comes from real self-examination. "Carter, you're 26 years old. You have time to grow, to learn, to become better than you are. The fact that you're thinking about this means you're already on that path. Will you teach me, not formally, just, when you see me doing something wrong, will you tell me?" This was how it started, one person asking, then another, until invisibility became impossible, until teaching became inevitable. Martha knew she should say no, should maintain boundaries, should protect the fragile peace she'd built. But looking at Carter's earnest face, she saw Nathan, saw every young operator she'd trained, saw the possibility of making a difference, of honoring her son by helping others survive. "All right," she said quietly. "When I see something that could get you killed, I'll mention it. But understand this isn't formal instruction. I'm still the janitor, you're still the instructor. This is just observation." Carter's face lit up. "Thank you, seriously, thank you." He left her to her cleaning, but word spread. By the end of the shift, 3 other instructors had approached her with similar requests. By week's end, it was 7. And Martha realized that General Morrison had known exactly what he was doing. He'd given her an official path to do what she was already doing unofficially, had created structure around the inevitable, had offered her a way back that honored both her grief and her gifts. 2 weeks after Morrison's offer, Martha signed the consulting contract, not because she was ready to teach, but because she was tired of fighting against who she was, tired of pretending that mopping floors was enough, tired of dishonoring Nathan's memory by wasting everything he'd learned from her. The contract started small, 2 hours a week, observing training sessions, providing written feedback to Morrison. No direct interaction with instructors unless specifically requested. It was manageable, controllable, a toe in the water instead of diving into the deep end. But water has a way of pulling you under. What started as observation became consultation. Consultation became demonstration. Demonstration became irregular teaching sessions. And before Martha fully understood what was happening, she was back in the world she'd fled. Not as Instructor Zero. That name stayed buried, but as Martha Hayes, consultant, advisor, the woman who saw what others missed and knew how to fix it. The instructors responded like plants to sunlight. Carter's technique improved dramatically. Blake's arrogance transformed into confident competence. Foster incorporated her feedback so thoroughly his entire curriculum evolved. Even Jasper, with his subtle cruelty, softened, began asking questions instead of making assumptions, began listening instead of performing. The facility's injury rate started dropping. 16 injuries over 3 months, then 12, then 8. Morrison's gamble was paying off, but the cost to Martha was mounting. Every improvement reminded her of Nathan. Every life potentially saved echoed with the life she'd lost. Every grateful instructor was another person she'd started to care about. And caring meant vulnerability, meant pain, meant risk. Late one night after a particularly successful training session, Iris Mina found Martha cleaning the conference room. "You're good at hiding," Iris said without preamble, "but I see you, really see you, and I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For coming back, for sharing what you know, for being brave enough to care again after loss." Iris paused. "I lost my husband in Afghanistan 5 years ago. I understand what it costs to keep living when everything in you wants to stop." Martha's hands stilled on the table she was wiping. "How did you do it? Keep going." "I found purpose in pain, meaning in survival. I couldn't save him, but I could honor him by being the operator he believed I could be, by teaching others, by making his death mean something beyond tragedy." Iris's voice was quiet, steady, the voice of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged on the other side. "You're doing the same thing, even if you don't realize it yet." "I'm just consulting." "You're saving lives, training the people who train others, making Nathan's sacrifice matter by preventing other mothers from receiving folded flags. That's not just consulting, that's legacy." After Iris left, Martha sat in the empty conference room, thinking about legacy, about Nathan, about the choice between hiding and living. Grief didn't disappear, didn't diminish, but maybe it could transform, could become fuel instead of weight, could drive purpose instead of destroying it. She wasn't healed, wasn't whole, probably never would be completely, but maybe that was okay. Maybe survival didn't require wholeness, just willingness. Willingness to keep moving forward, to keep teaching, to keep honoring the dead by serving the living. Martha finished cleaning the conference room, stored her supplies, clocked out, drove home. But instead of sitting in silent darkness, she turned on the lights, made coffee, opened her laptop, and began writing. Technical manuals for close-quarter combat, updated curriculum for hand-to-hand training, everything she'd learned over decades, everything Nathan had helped her refine, everything that could help others survive. The words flowed, decades of knowledge pouring onto pages. Hours disappeared. Dawn arrived, and Martha was still writing, still teaching, still living, because that's what warriors do. They find purpose in pain. They honor the fallen by helping the living. They transform tragedy into triumph, one small decision at a time. Can you feel the moment when hiding becomes harder than living? Martha felt it 3 months into her consulting contract. It came during a late-night session when Private Aidan Mason approached her with a question about defensive tactics. His eyes held worry, the kind that comes from knowing deployment is approaching. Knowing real combat is different than training. Knowing people die from mistakes. "Ma'am, can I ask you something personal?" Martha set down her clipboard. "You can ask." "Were you ever scared, before missions, during combat, or did the fear go away after enough experience?" The question was innocent, genuine, but it cut through every defense Martha had constructed. Because yes, she'd been scared, terrified every single time. Fear didn't disappear with experience. It evolved, became sharper, more informed, more aware of exactly how many things could go wrong. Fear never goes away, Aidan. It just becomes familiar. You learn to operate despite it, to use it as fuel instead of letting it paralyze you. How? By focusing on what you can control. Your training, your preparation, your team, everything else is noise. You acknowledge the fear, then you do the job anyway, because that's what professionals do. Aidan nodded slowly, processing. "Did you ever lose anyone in combat?" The air left Martha's lungs. Nathan's face flashed in her mind. Not as he died. She didn't know those details, didn't want them, but as he lived, smiling, training, believing he was invincible the way all young operators do. "Yes," she said quietly. "I lost someone important." "How did you keep going after?" "I didn't, not at first. I stopped, walked away, tried to disappear, and that worked for a while, until it didn't. until the pain of hiding became worse than the pain of living. Is that why you're here, back teaching? Martha looked at this 19-year-old with questions too heavy for his age, saw every young operator she'd trained, every son who'd deployed, every mother who'd waited for news. I'm here because someone gave me a second chance, reminded me that grief can be transformed into purpose, that loss can drive meaning instead of destroying it. I'm here because the best way to honor the dead is to help the living survive. Aiden was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you, ma'am, for telling me the truth and for being here. Some of us really need you. After he left, Martha stood alone in the training center. The same space where Carter had challenged her months ago. The same mats where she demonstrated that chokehold, where invisibility had shattered, where everything had changed. And she realized something fundamental. She wasn't hiding anymore. Somewhere along the way, consulting had become teaching. Teaching had become purpose. Purpose had become healing, not complete healing. The grief was still there. Nathan's absence still ached, but the pain had shifted. Transformed, become something she could carry instead of something that carried her. The next morning, Martha met with General Morrison, not in his office, on the training grounds, where operators ran through tactical scenarios, where instructors shouted corrections, where the real work happened. I want to expand my contract, she said without preamble. Morrison's eyebrow raised. Expand how? More hours, direct instruction instead of just observation, authority to modify curriculum, to implement changes without going through approval chains, to do the job properly instead of halfway. What changed? I did, or maybe I'm finally admitting what was always true. I'm a teacher, have been for 30 years, tried to stop being one, tried to be invisible, but that's not who I am. And pretending otherwise dishonors everyone I've lost, everyone I could still help. Morrison studied her. This is a significant shift. Are you sure you're ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway, because ready is a luxury. People need training now. Not when I've fully processed my grief. Not when healing is complete, now. While I still have knowledge to share, before anyone else dies from preventable mistakes. All right, I'll draft a new contract. Instructor status, full curriculum authority, competitive salary, official title. But I need one thing from you first. What? I need you to tell me about your son, about Nathan, because if you're coming back fully, you need to be honest about why you left, what happened, what you're carrying. I can't support you properly if I don't understand the weight. Martha's first instinct was to refuse, to keep Nathan private, protected, sacred, but Morrison's face held only compassion, the kind earned through similar losses, similar weights, similar scars, so she talked. For the first time since Nathan's death, she told the story, not the official version, the real one, how he'd trained under her, how she'd pushed him to be better, how proud she'd been when he made special forces, how confident she'd felt that her training would keep him safe. And how that confidence had shattered when the notification officers arrived at her door. He died saving his team, Martha said, voice steady despite the tears. Made the hardest choice, sacrificed himself so 5 others could live. The reports called it heroic, necessary, the right decision, and part of me knows that's true, but the other part, the mother part, just wants him back, wants to unhear the doorbell, unwrap the folded flag, undo everything. You can't, Morrison said gently. None of us can. All we can do is honor their choices by living in a way that makes their sacrifice meaningful. That's what I'm trying to do, by teaching, by preventing other mothers from receiving flags, by making sure every operator I train has the absolute best chance to come home. It won't bring Nathan back. Nothing will, but it gives his death purpose beyond grief. Morrison extended his hand. Welcome back, Instructor Hayes, officially this time. Let's transform this facility into something that would make Nathan proud. They shook hands, a contract signed in spirit before paper, a commitment made between people who understood loss and chose purpose anyway. Over the next weeks, Martha's transformation accelerated. The janitor uniform disappeared, replaced by instructor gear. The night shifts ended, replaced by full daytime curriculum development. The invisibility vanished, replaced by presence, authority, the weight of responsibility she'd fled. And it was hard. God, it was hard. Every class reminded her of Nathan. Every young operator triggered memories. Every successful technique was bittersweet. But alongside the pain was something else. Satisfaction. The deep bone-level satisfaction that comes from doing what you're meant to do, what you're built for, what honors both the living and the dead. Carter became her assistant instructor, his earlier arrogance completely transformed, replaced by humble competence. Blake evolved into a thoughtful trainer, prioritizing substance over style. Foster incorporated her decades of experience into his curriculum. Even Jasper apologized, requested permission to retrain under her updated methods. The facility's injury rate continued dropping. 8 injuries became 5. 5 became 3. Morrison presented data to military leadership. Training Facility 7's transformation became legendary. Other facilities requested consultations. International programs inquired about curriculum access. Martha's reputation, dormant for 3 years, resurged. Fame wasn't the goal, saving lives was. Every operator who deployed with better training was Nathan's legacy. Every mission completed successfully was his sacrifice made meaningful. Every mother who didn't receive a folded flag was grief transformed into purpose. And slowly, painfully, Martha began to heal, not completely. The wound was too deep for complete healing, but functionally, meaningfully, in ways that allowed her to breathe without drowning, to remember without breaking, to teach without collapsing. 4 months into her official instructor role, Martha received a phone call, not from Morrison, from someone else, someone from her past. Instructor Zero, it's Victor Crane, from the International Training Program. I heard you're back. Victor, she hadn't heard that voice in 3 years, hadn't thought she'd ever hear it again. I'm not Instructor Zero anymore. That name stayed buried. Fair enough, but you're teaching again. That's what matters. I have a situation, complicated, requires your specific expertise, interested. What kind of situation? Classified, but it involves training operators for high-risk deployment. The kind where technique difference means survival difference. I need the best, and you're still the best, even after 3 years. Martha's first instinct was to refuse, to maintain boundaries, to stay within the safety of Training Facility 7. But another part of her, the part that remembered who she'd been, felt the pull, the challenge, the opportunity to apply mastery at the highest levels. Send me the details, classified clearance. I'll review and respond. Will do, and Martha, it's good to have you back. The world needs people like you, especially now. The call ended. Martha sat in her office, surrounded by training materials and tactical gear and photos of students she'd trained. On her desk, Nathan's challenge coin, the one she'd received with his folded flag, a reminder of cost and sacrifice and love that transcends death. She picked up the coin, felt its weight, its significance, and whispered to her son, to his memory, to the choice she was making. I'm honoring you, the best way I know how, by teaching, by saving lives, by making your sacrifice matter. I hope that's enough. I hope you'd be proud. The coin offered no response, but Martha didn't need one. She knew what Nathan would say. Keep going, keep teaching, keep living, because that's what warriors do. They honor the fallen by serving the living. They transform tragedy into triumph. They choose purpose over pain, every single day. Martha set down the coin, opened her laptop, began reviewing Victor's classified briefing. The work continued. The mission evolved. The healing progressed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And sometimes enough is everything. Have you ever noticed how the hardest truths come from the quietest moments? Martha discovered this 2 months into her instructor role when Captain Foster approached her after a training session. His face held tension, the kind that comes from carrying weight too heavy for one person. "Ma'am, can we talk? Privately." They walked to an empty conference room. Foster closed the door, stood there for a moment, struggling with words. Martha waited, Patience learned from decades of drawing out difficult truths. Finally, Foster spoke. "I need to tell you something about your son, about Nathan." The world tilted. Martha's heartbeat became deafening. "What about Nathan?" "I was there. When he died, part of the operation. I didn't know he was your son until Morrison mentioned it last month. Didn't make the connection. Different last names on the roster. But when Morrison said Nathan Hayes, Special Forces operator, killed in action 3 years ago, I knew. I was there." Martha sat down, not because she wanted to, because her legs stopped working. "Tell me." "Are you sure?" The reports were sanitized, made clean. Reality was messier. "Tell me everything." Foster sat across from her. "We were 6 kilometers behind enemy lines. Intelligence gathering mission. We had a local informant, supposed to be reliable, turned out to be a setup. We walked into an ambush. 15 hostiles, heavy weapons. We were pinned, taking casualties. Radio damaged, no exfil possible. We were going to die there, all of us." He paused, breathed, continued. "Nathan saw it before anyone else. Saw the enemy position, saw the weapon cache, saw the only way to break the ambush. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for orders, just acted. Grabbed demolition charges. Ran toward the enemy position under full fire, drew attention, gave us covering fire, reached the cache, set the charges, and detonated." Martha's hands gripped the table edge. "Did he, was it?" "Instant. The blast was massive, took out the weapon cache and most of the hostile force. Gave us the opening we needed to extract. 5 of us survived because of him. 5. And I need you to know something. His decision saved us. But it also saved the mission. The intelligence we gathered prevented a major attack. Hundreds of civilian lives. Nathan's sacrifice had ripple effects we're still discovering. The information came in waves, each wave devastating, each wave meaningful. Nathan hadn't just died, he'd chosen death, had calculated the equation, had decided his life was worth 5 lives, worth hundreds of lives, worth mission success. Did he suffer? No, it was instant, and if this helps, he wasn't scared. I saw his face. Right before, he looked determined, focused, like he was executing a training drill. Everything you taught him came through in that moment. The calmness under pressure, the ability to assess and act, the understanding that sometimes sacrifice is the mission. Martha's vision blurred with tears, not just grief, pride, devastating, overwhelming pride. Her son had become everything she'd trained him to be, had applied every lesson, had made the hardest choice with courage and clarity. "Thank you for telling me." "There's more. The 5 of us who survived, we made a pact. To honor Nathan by being the operators he believed we could be, to train others the way he would have, to make his sacrifice matter beyond that single mission. That's why I became an instructor, why I've been teaching CQC. It was my way of paying forward what Nathan gave me. Life." Foster reached into his pocket, pulled out a challenge coin, different from Nathan's, but similar. "We had these made, 5 of us. One for each person he saved. I want you to have mine, because you're the reason Nathan could make that choice. Your training, your wisdom, your excellence, it's all in him, and through him in us, and through us in every operator we train." He placed the coin on the table. Martha picked it up. "Read the inscription. For Nathan Hayes, who gave everything so we could live, we remember, we honor, we continue." The tears came fully now. 3 years of grief finally finding expression, not just loss, meaning, purpose, legacy. Nathan's death wasn't just tragedy, it was choice, sacrifice, love made manifest through action. "I've been teaching for 2 months, Martha said through tears. Training operators, updating curriculum, trying to honor Nathan by helping others survive. But I've been angry at myself, at my training. Thinking if I'd taught him differently, if I'd prepared him better, maybe he'd still be alive. Maybe the outcome would have changed." Foster shook his head firmly. "No, your training is exactly why he could make that choice, why he had the skill to execute it, why 5 people came home. If you taught him differently, we'd all be dead, and hundreds of civilians would have died in that prevented attack. Your training didn't kill Nathan, It made his sacrifice possible, made his death meaningful. There's a difference. The weight Martha had carried for 3 years began to shift, not disappear, transform. Grief remained, but alongside it was understanding, acceptance. The knowledge that Nathan had died as he'd lived, with purpose, with courage, with the application of everything she'd taught him. "How do I live with that?" Martha whispered. "Knowing my training enabled his death." "You live by continuing to train others, by making his sacrifice ripple forward. Every operator you teach is Nathan's legacy. Every life saved is his choice validated. You don't erase the grief. You give it purpose. Transform it into fuel. Make his death the beginning of something instead of just an ending." They sat in silence, two people connected by loss and survival, by sacrifice and continuation. Finally, Martha spoke. "Thank you, Foster, for being there, for surviving, for telling me the truth. It doesn't make it easier, but it makes it bearable. One more thing. The other 4 survivors, we'd like to meet you, to thank you personally, to share stories about Nathan, to show you who we've become because of him. Would that be okay?" Martha nodded, unable to speak. The meeting happened 2 weeks later. 5 people gathered in Martha's office. Foster, 3 men, 1 woman, all special forces operators, all alive because of Nathan. They shared stories, memories, details the official reports had sanitized. They talked about Nathan's humor, his competence, his quiet leadership, the way he'd made everyone better just by being present. And they shared what they'd done since. Foster becoming an instructor, Lieutenant Sarah Chen starting a nonprofit for Gold Star families, Sergeant Marcus Webb developing trauma counseling programs for combat veterans, each of them taking Nathan's sacrifice and building meaning from it, creating ripples that extended far beyond that single mission. "You raised a warrior," Sarah said. "Not just skilled, good. Nathan made us better people, better operators, better humans. That's rare, special. And it came from you." After they left, Martha sat alone with both challenge coins, Nathan's and Foster's, 2 pieces of metal, 2 symbols of sacrifice and survival, 2 reminders that death can have meaning if the living choose to give it purpose. She placed them on her desk, next to photos of her students, next to training materials, next to everything that represented her new life, her new mission, Nathan's continuing legacy. That night, Martha wrote in her journal, something she'd started doing at Morrison's suggestion, processing grief through words. "I learned today that Nathan died exactly as he lived, with courage, with purpose, with the application of everything I taught him. It doesn't make his death easier to bear, but it makes it meaningful, transforms tragedy into testament, grief into gratitude, and I understand now what I need to do, not just teach, honor, make every training session a tribute to Nathan. Every operator I train an extension of his sacrifice. Every life saved a validation of his choice." The words helped, didn't heal, but helped. Created framework for understanding, for moving forward, for living with loss without being consumed by it. Over the following months, Martha's teaching evolved, became more than technique, more than tactics. It became transmission of values, of character, of the understanding that warriors aren't just people who fight. They're people who choose sacrifice when necessary, who make hard decisions with clear eyes, who understand that some things are worth dying for. Her students responded, training scores improved, but more importantly, attitude shifted, less arrogance, more humility, less performance, more substance. The culture of Training Facility 7 transformed, became about excellence, not ego, about preparation, not glory, about honoring sacrifice through competence. Nathan's influence transmitted through Martha, reshaping an entire facility. 6 months into her instructor role, Martha received another call from Victor. "I have that situation I mentioned. Details are classified, but I need you in person. 3 weeks. Can you make it?" Martha looked around her office, at her students' photos, at challenge coins, at the life she'd rebuilt from grief. She could refuse, could stay in safety, could maintain boundaries, but Nathan hadn't stayed safe, hadn't maintained boundaries, had run toward danger because the mission mattered, because lives mattered, because sacrifice sometimes is the only answer. Send me the details, Martha said. I'll be there. Thank you. And Martha, what you're doing at that facility, training the trainers, it's changing the entire program. Nathan would be proud. The call ended. Martha sat quietly, feeling the weight of responsibility, the honor of legacy, the burden of continuation. She wasn't the same person who'd mopped floors 6 months ago, wasn't the same instructor who'd taught before Nathan's death. She was something new, forged in grief, tempered by loss, strengthened by purpose, and finally, painfully, purposefully alive. She picked up Nathan's challenge coin, held it up to the light, and made a promise. I'm honoring you by teaching others to survive, by making your sacrifice ripple forward, by transforming grief into purpose. It's not enough to bring you back, nothing ever will be, but it's enough to make your death mean something beyond tragedy, and that's the best I can do. The best any of us can do, choose meaning over despair, purpose over pain, life over loss. The coin glinted, silent, eternal, a reminder that some things don't end. They transform, evolve, continue through those who carry them forward. Martha set it down, opened her laptop, began preparing materials for Victor's assignment. The work continued. The mission evolved. Nathan's legacy grew, one training session at a time, one life saved at a time, one choice at a time, because that's what warriors do. They keep moving forward. They honor the fallen by serving the living. They transform tragedy into triumph, always, forever, until their own sacrifice becomes someone else's inspiration to continue. What does redemption look like when it comes from the people who tried to break you? Martha discovered this during an unexpected confrontation 8 months into her instructor role. She was reviewing tactical scenarios when Sergeant Carter entered her office. His face was serious, troubled, the kind of expression that precedes difficult conversations. Ma'am, I need to tell you something about that first night, when I challenged you. Martha set down her materials. Carter, we've moved past that. You apologized, I accepted, it's done. No, it's not, because I didn't just challenge you. I recorded it on my phone, had plans to post it online, make you a viral humiliation. Grandma getting put in her place. I was going to destroy you for entertainment. The confession hung in the air. Martha's expression didn't change, didn't harden, just waited. But you didn't post it. No, because after you demonstrated that chokehold, after I understood who you really were, I deleted it. But that doesn't erase the intention, doesn't erase what I'd planned. And I need you to know that I understand now. Understand what I almost did. How close I came to ruining someone who didn't deserve it. Someone who's become the most important teacher I've ever had. Martha studied him, saw genuine remorse, the kind that comes from real growth. Why tell me this now, 8 months later? Because we're training new instructors next week, and one of them reminds me of who I used to be. Arrogant, quick to judge, obsessed with proving superiority. And I realized I can't teach him to be better if I'm still carrying this, still hiding what I almost did to you. What do you want from me, Carter? Forgiveness, real forgiveness, not the polite kind you gave when you accepted my apology, but the deep kind, the kind that says despite what I intended, despite who I was, you believe I can become better, that I am becoming better. Martha was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Nathan, about sacrifice, about the operators who'd survived because of him, about legacy and transformation and the difference between who we are and who we become. Carter, I forgave you the night it happened, before you apologized, before you deleted the video, because I understood something you didn't. You were scared, intimidated by someone who challenged your authority just by existing, and scared people do terrible things, cruel things, things they later regret. That doesn't excuse it. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. And more importantly, you've proven through 8 months of hard work and genuine growth that you're not that person anymore. The Carter who challenged me is gone, replaced by someone better, someone I'm proud to teach, someone I trust to train others. That's real redemption, not erasing the past, becoming different despite it. Carter's eyes filled with tears. How do you do that? Forgive so completely, After everything you've lost, everything you've survived, how do you not carry bitterness? Because bitterness is weight, and I'm already carrying enough. Nathan's loss, 3 years of grief, the burden of knowledge that could save lives if properly applied. I don't have room for bitterness, so I choose something else. Purpose, teaching, transformation, making people better than they are, including myself. You make me want to be better. Good, then be better. Teach that new instructor what you've learned. Not through lecture, through example. Show him that strength isn't domination, it's humility. That real expertise doesn't need to prove itself. It just exists. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am, I can do that. After Carter left, Martha reflected on forgiveness, on transformation, on the reality that people aren't static, they're fluid, capable of profound change if given the opportunity and the guidance. Carter had been cruel, arrogant, dangerous in his assumptions, but he'd also been willing to change, to grow, to become something better, and that willingness was everything. The new instructor training began the following week. 15 candidates, most experienced, most competent, but one stood out. Lieutenant Marcus Drake, 28, physically impressive, technically skilled, and absolutely convinced of his own superiority. He reminded Martha of Carter, of Blake, of every arrogant operator who'd mistaken confidence for competence. During the first tactical scenario, Drake made 17 technical errors, small ones. The kind that don't matter in training but get people killed in combat. Martha noted each one. After the scenario, she approached him privately. Lieutenant Drake, I observed some inefficiencies in your technique, small adjustments that could improve effectiveness. Do you have time to review? Drake's smile was condescending. Ma'am, respectfully, I've trained in 3 different programs, studied under multiple instructors. I think my technique is solid. I'm sure it is. I'm suggesting it could be better. Based on what? You've observed one scenario. I've trained for 8 years. Martha's expression didn't change, didn't harden, just remained neutral, professional. Based on 30 years of training operators at the highest levels, based on techniques refined through real combat application, based on watching 17 specific errors that could get you killed if replicated in the field. But you're right. You've trained for 8 years. That's definitely sufficient. The sarcasm was subtle, almost invisible, but present. Drake's face flushed. I don't appreciate the condescension, ma'am. And I don't appreciate arrogance masquerading as confidence. But here we are. So let me be direct. You have 2 choices. Accept that there's always something to learn and work with me to improve your technique, or continue believing you're already perfect and eventually discover otherwise when it costs lives. Your decision. She walked away, leaving Drake standing there, angry, embarrassed, exactly where Carter had been 8 months ago, exactly where transformation begins. That evening, Drake approached Carter, looking for sympathy, for validation, for someone to confirm that the instructor was out of line. She called out errors I didn't make, Drake complained. 17 specific inefficiencies. That's ridiculous. I'm one of the top-ranked operators in my unit. Carter listened, remembered himself 8 months ago, remembered the glove he'd thrown, the challenge he'd made, the humiliation he'd intended. How many of those errors were real? He asked quietly. What? The 17 things she mentioned. Were they real errors, or was she making them up? Drake hesitated. I don't know, maybe some were real, but 17 seems excessive. It's not. She sees everything. Every small inefficiency, every technical flaw, every shortcut that works in training but fails in combat. And she mentions them because she cares, because she knows that small errors become big problems when adrenaline spikes and bullets fly. How do you know? Because she did the same thing to me, pointed out flaws I didn't want to see, challenged assumptions I wasn't willing to question, and I responded like you're responding, with anger, with defensiveness, with absolute certainty that I was right and she was wrong. What changed? Carter smiled. She demonstrated the technique. showed me exactly how those small inefficiencies compound into major problems, made me understand that what I thought was solid was actually fragile, that my confidence was covering for competence gaps I didn't know existed. And then she taught me how to fix them, how to become actually skilled instead of just convinced of my skill. Drake was quiet, processing. Did it work? My injury rate is 0. My students consistently outperform others. My technique has evolved more in 8 months than in the previous 8 years. So yeah, it worked. But only because I was willing to admit I didn't know everything, willing to learn from someone who knew more, willing to transform. That's what she's asking from me. That's what she asks from everyone, not obedience, growth, not submission, excellence. The question is whether you're willing to be uncomfortable long enough to become better. Drake returned to Martha the next morning. "Ma'am, I'd like to review those 17 errors, if you're still willing to teach me." Martha looked at him, saw the same journey Carter had taken, the same path from arrogance to humility, the same transformation that made teaching worthwhile. "I'm always willing to teach people who are willing to learn. Let's start with your stance. It's creating an imbalance that cascades through your entire technique." They worked for 2 hours, Martha breaking down each inefficiency, explaining the physics, demonstrating the corrections. Drake absorbed it like desert absorbing rain, hungry, desperate, realizing how much he didn't know, how much he'd been missing. By the end, he was exhausted, humbled, transformed. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for my arrogance, for dismissing your feedback, for assuming I knew better." Apology accepted. But more importantly, you owe yourself the commitment to never stop learning, to never assume you've arrived, to always remain curious about what you don't know. That's how good operators become great ones. Not through ego, through humility. Over the 3-week training program, Martha watched Drake transform, watched arrogance dissolve, watched competence emerge, watched him become the kind of instructor who teaches rather than performs, who builds others up rather than proving superiority. It was Nathan's legacy, transmitted through her, creating ripples that extended far beyond single students. The final day of training featured evaluation scenarios, all 15 instructors performing under observation. Drake's performance was flawless, not perfect, flawless. Every technique clean, every decision sound, every movement efficient. When he finished, he approached Martha. "Thank you for seeing past my arrogance, for teaching me anyway, for believing I could become better. You did the hard part, I just provided guidance. The transformation was yours." "No, you provided more than guidance. You provided grace. You could have dismissed me, written me off, refused to teach someone who disrespected you, but you didn't. Why?" Martha thought about Carter, about Nathan, about all the people who transformed through willingness and guidance. "Because writing people off is easy, teaching them is hard, and I prefer hard work that creates meaning over easy choices that create nothing. You have potential, Drake, not just as an operator, as an instructor, as someone who can transform others the way you've been transformed. Don't waste it." "I won't, I promise." After the training concluded, Morrison approached Martha. "I watched the evaluations, particularly Drake's transformation. 3 weeks ago he was insufferable. Today he's exceptional. What did you do?" "I did what I always do. Saw potential, challenged assumptions, provided tools for growth, then stepped back and let the transformation happen." "You make it sound simple." "It's not. It's exhausting, frustrating, often thankless. But it's also the most important work I know. Because every transformed instructor transforms dozens of operators, and every transformed operator potentially saves lives. The ripples matter, General. Nathan taught me that, through his sacrifice, through his choice, through his legacy." Morrison nodded. "Speaking of legacy, I have news. Military leadership wants to expand your program. Create a national training initiative based on your curriculum. Make your techniques standard across all Special Forces units. It would mean travel, Consultation with multiple facilities. Significant time commitment. Interested. Martha's first instinct was to refuse, to stay within the safety of Training Facility 7, to maintain boundaries. But then she thought about Nathan, about the 5 operators he'd saved, about Drake's transformation, about every life that could be saved through better training. How significant is significant? 3 months initial deployment, visiting 7 facilities, training their lead instructors, implementing standardized curriculum, with option to extend if results justify. I'll need to maintain connection with this facility, keep teaching my current students, continue consulting with Foster and Carter. Understood, we'll structure it as rotating deployment, 2 weeks on-site various facilities, 1 week back here, sustainable long-term. Martha considered. The work would be hard, exhausting, would require her to constantly repeat lessons, face resistance, transform arrogance into competence, but it would also multiply impact, create ripples far beyond single facility, make Nathan's sacrifice mean even more. All right, I'll do it, on one condition. Name it. Carter comes with me as assistant instructor. He's ready, and he understands transformation from the inside. That makes him valuable. Done. I'll arrange the logistics. You'll start in 4 weeks. That gives you time to prepare materials and say goodbye to current students. The news spread quickly. Martha's students gathered to congratulate her, to express gratitude, to share how her teaching had transformed them. Aiden, now preparing for advanced deployment, spoke for everyone. Ma'am, you changed this facility, changed us, made us better than we thought we could be. Whatever you teach at other facilities, they're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have had you, all of you. You reminded me why teaching matters, why transformation is possible, why Nathan's sacrifice can ripple forward. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. That night Martha sat in her office, surrounded by photos, challenge coins, training materials, evidence of 8 months rebuilding life from grief. She'd come to Training Facility 7 to hide, to disappear, to avoid pain through invisibility, but invisibility hadn't worked, couldn't work, because some people aren't meant to hide, they're meant to teach, to transform, to make others better, and fighting that calling only creates different pain. She picked up Nathan's challenge coin, the one she carried everywhere, the reminder of cost and sacrifice and love. I'm expanding the work, Nathan, taking your legacy further, making your choice ripple through more facilities, more operators, more lives potentially saved. It's not bringing you back, nothing ever will, but it's making your death mean something beyond tragedy, and that's enough, that's everything. The coin glinted in the lamplight, silent, eternal, a reminder that some sacrifices never end, they just transform, ripple forward, create meaning through those who carry them. Martha set it down, began preparing materials for the national initiative. The work continued. The mission evolved. Nathan's legacy grew because that's what warriors do. They honor the fallen by serving the living. They transform tragedy into triumph. They choose purpose over pain, every day, every student, every life touched. Until sacrifice becomes legacy, and legacy becomes transformation, and transformation becomes love made manifest through teaching. Can one person truly change everything? Or do they just light a match that others keep burning? Martha pondered this question as she stood in her apartment 3 years and 2 months after Nathan's death. Tomorrow she'd begin the National Training Initiative. 7 facilities, hundreds of instructors, thousands of operators who'd eventually train under curriculum she'd developed. The weight of it felt enormous, the responsibility crushing, the potential for impact both thrilling and terrifying. Her encrypted phone buzzed. Victor. Martha, I heard about the national initiative. Congratulations. You're transforming military training at a systemic level. Or I'm spreading myself too thin and will fail spectacularly. Victor laughed. You don't do failure, never have, but I'm calling about something else. That classified situation I mentioned. It's evolved, become urgent. I need you for 3 weeks. After your national initiative completes. Interested. Details. Can't share over phone, but it involves training a joint task force, international operators, high-risk deployment, the kind where technique difference literally means survival difference. You're the only instructor I trust for this. Martha hesitated. The national initiative would be exhausting. Adding international deployment after would be punishing. But it would also extend Nathan's legacy globally, make his sacrifice ripple across borders, transform operators from multiple nations. Send me the briefing, classified channels. I'll review and respond within 48 hours. Thank you, and Martha, what you're building, this transformation of military training. Nathan would be incredibly proud. The call ended. Martha sat with the weight of it, the expanding responsibility, the growing impact, the reality that she'd gone from hiding to leading, from invisibility to influence, from grief to purpose. It was Nathan's doing, his sacrifice, his choice, his legacy forcing her to become better than loss, stronger than pain, more purposeful than grief. The next morning, Martha and Carter flew to the first facility, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, home to basic combat training and advanced individual training. They arrived to skepticism. Instructors who'd heard about this revolutionary curriculum but doubted effectiveness, who'd seen consultants come and go, who believed their methods were already optimal. Martha gathered the lead instructors, 23 of them, mostly male, all experienced, all skeptical. She didn't start with credentials, didn't list accomplishments, didn't try to convince them she was qualified. She simply asked a question. How many of you have lost someone in combat, someone you trained, someone whose death made you question everything you taught them? Hands raised slowly. 9 out of 23. 9 instructors carrying the same weight Martha carried, the same grief transformed into purpose, the same desperate need to make sure it never happened again. I lost my son, Martha said quietly. Nathan Hayes, Special Forces operator, killed in action 3 years ago, and for 3 years I believed my training had failed him, that if I'd taught him differently, better, more completely, he might have survived. I carried that guilt like a stone. Let it sink me, destroy me, drive me into hiding. The room was completely silent. 23 instructors who'd arrived with skepticism now listening with intensity. Because grief speaks to grief. Loss connects to loss. Understanding flows between people who have carried similar weights. Then I learned the truth. Nathan died saving 5 operators, made a choice, applied everything I'd taught him, used techniques we drilled together, and his sacrifice prevented hundreds of civilian casualties. My training didn't fail him. It enabled him to make the hardest choice with competence and courage. And once I understood that, everything changed. She paused, let the words settle. I'm not here to tell you my methods are better than yours. I'm here to share what I've learned through decades of training and 3 years of grief. Some of it will align with what you already do. Some will challenge assumptions. All of it comes from the same place you're all operating from. The desperate need to make sure the people we train come home. That their training is so complete, so thorough, so effective that when split-second decisions arrive, they have the tools to survive. What if we disagree with your methods? One instructor asked, challenging testing. Then we discuss it, compare approaches, find what works best. I'm not here to dictate, I'm here to collaborate, to learn from you while sharing what I know, because I guarantee you've discovered things I haven't, developed techniques I could benefit from. This is exchange, not indoctrination. The skepticism began to crack, not disappear, transform, from defensive resistance to cautious engagement. Over the next 2 weeks, Martha worked with Fort Jackson's instructors, demonstrating techniques, explaining physics, sharing combat applications, and learning from them, absorbing their innovations, their adaptations, their real-world experience. By week 2, the transformation was visible. Injury rates dropping, technique efficiency improving, instructor confidence building, not because Martha had replaced their methods, because she'd enhanced them, refined them, added precision to approaches that were already functional. The collaboration created something better than either side could have achieved alone. Carter watched it all with awe. How do you do that? Walk into a room full of skeptics and transform them into believers. I don't transform them. I just remind them why they're here. Connect them to purpose. Show them that we're all working toward the same goal, keeping operators alive. Once they understand I share that goal, that I've lost just like they've lost, that I'm not trying to prove superiority but prevent tragedy, the resistance disappears. It's brilliant. It's honest. And honesty is the only currency that matters when dealing with loss. The pattern repeated at each facility. Initial skepticism, shared grief, collaborative improvement, transformation through connection. By the fifth facility, Martha's reputation had spread. Instructors arrived not with resistance but readiness, eager to learn, hungry for refinement, believing that improvement was possible, that their methods could evolve, that Nathan's legacy could inform their teaching. At the seventh and final facility, Marine Corps Base Quantico, something unexpected happened. During a demonstration, a young instructor collapsed. Medical emergency, severe stress reaction, the kind that comes from pushing too hard for too long, carrying too much without releasing it. Martha recognized it immediately, saw herself 3 years ago, saw the breaking point approaching. After medical staff stabilized him, she visited his quarters, found him sitting in darkness, staring at photos. "You don't have to talk," Martha said quietly, "but I'm here if you want to." The instructor, Lieutenant James Wright, looked at her with hollow eyes. "I lost my entire team 6 months ago. Ambush in Syria. I was stateside for medical leave, couldn't deploy. They went without me, and they all died, every single one. I'm sorry." Everyone says that, but it doesn't change anything, doesn't bring them back, doesn't explain why I survived and they didn't. Martha sat down, not too close, respecting his space. "No, it doesn't, and nothing I say will make the guilt disappear, or the grief, or the desperate wish that you'd been there, that you could have made a difference, that you could have died with them instead of surviving without them." Wright's voice broke. "How do you know?" "Because I've felt all of it, lost my son in combat, spent 3 years wishing I could trade places, wishing I'd taught him different techniques, made different choices, somehow prevented the inevitable, but here's what I learned. Survivor's guilt is natural, expected, but it's also useless, because you didn't survive for nothing. You survived for something. The question is whether you'll waste that survival or transform it into purpose." How do I transform it? By teaching, by training others so thoroughly that they have better chances than your team did, by making their deaths mean something through your commitment to preventing more deaths. It doesn't erase the loss, nothing does, but it gives the loss purpose, makes your survival meaningful, transforms tragedy into legacy. Is that what you do? Train people to honor your son? Yes, every technique I teach, every operator I improve, every life potentially saved, that's Nathan's legacy. His sacrifice rippling forward through my work, through the work of people I've trained, through the operators they'll train, on, forever, until one death prevents thousands. Wright was quiet for a long time, processing, struggling. Finally, "Will you teach me, not just tactics, how to transform this into something bearable?" "I'll teach you both, starting tomorrow. For now, just rest. Let the medical team monitor you, and know that what you're feeling is normal, expected, and survivable. I'm proof of that." Martha left him to his grief, knowing that healing doesn't come from single conversations, but from accumulated moments, daily choices, gradual transformation. The work of surviving loss never ends. It just evolves, becomes more manageable, more purposeful, more bearable. The national initiative concluded successfully. 7 facilities transformed, 200 instructors trained, curriculum implemented that would touch thousands of operators over coming years. Morrison presented Martha with documentation showing preliminary results. Injury rates down across all facilities, performance metrics improved, morale lifted. The transformation was systemic, significant, meaningful. You've changed military training fundamentally, Morrison said. Created a legacy that will outlive both of us. Nathan's sacrifice is now woven into the fabric of how we prepare operators. That's extraordinary. It's not enough, Martha said, not with sadness, with determination. It's never enough because people will still die, training will still fail some. Situations will still arise that no preparation prevents, but it's something. It's everything I can do, and that has to be sufficient. It's more than sufficient. It's transformative. And speaking of transformation, Lieutenant Wright requested transfer to Training Facility 7, wants to train under you directly. Says you're the only instructor who understands what he's carrying. Approved, he needs purpose, community, understanding. I can provide that. 2 weeks later, Martha returned to Training Facility 7. Home base, familiar faces, students who'd continued training during her absence. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, running on fumes, but also fulfilled, purposeful, aware that she'd made Nathan's sacrifice ripple further than she'd imagined possible. Her first night back, Victor called. "Martha, I'm sending the classified briefing, 3 weeks. Joint Task Force training, international operators, high stakes. You ready?" Martha looked around her office, at photos, challenge coins, evidence of transformation, at proof that loss could become purpose, that grief could fuel teaching, that one person really could change everything by changing the people who change others. "Send it. I'll review tonight." "One more thing. The task force specifically requested you. By name, they've heard about the national initiative, about your methods, about Nathan's legacy. They want the best, and you're the best." After the call, Martha opened the classified briefing, scanned details, saw complexity, risk, opportunity, the kind of deployment where her expertise could save lives immediately, where Nathan's legacy could extend internationally, where transformation could ripple across borders. She created response, accepted assignment, committed to 3 weeks, then sat back, feeling the weight, the responsibility, the honor. She'd gone from janitor to legend in 10 months, from hiding to leading, from grief to purpose. And it was all because of Nathan, because of his sacrifice, because of his choice to die so others could live. Martha picked up his challenge coin, the one she carried everywhere, looked at it, really looked, and whispered the truth she'd learned through pain and teaching and transformation. "Thank you, Nathan, for being exactly who you were, for making the hardest choice, for giving me purpose through loss. I'm honoring you the only way I know how, by teaching, by saving lives, by making your sacrifice mean everything. I love you, I miss you, and I'm surviving because you taught me how." The coin glinted, silent, eternal, a reminder that love doesn't end with death, it transforms, ripples forward, creates meaning through those who carry it. Martha set it down, began preparing materials for international deployment. The work continued. The mission evolved. Nathan's legacy grew because that's what warriors do. They honor the fallen by serving the living. They transform tragedy into triumph. They choose purpose over pain, every day, every student, every life touched. Until one sacrifice becomes infinite transformation. Until one death prevents thousands. Until grief becomes love made manifest through teaching. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, teaching when exhausted, leading when grieving, transforming when broken, making loss into legacy, making pain into purpose, making one life ended too soon ripple forward into eternity through every life it touches, every operator trained, every technique refined, every moment when training saves someone who might have died. That's Nathan's real legacy, not his death, the lives saved because of it. The mother who didn't receive a folded flag because Martha taught better techniques, the operator who came home because curriculum improved, the families who stayed whole because one sacrifice rippled forward through thousands of training sessions, forever, always, until love defeats loss through the simple act of teaching what matters, of passing forward what was paid for, of transforming grief into grace, one student at a time, one life at a time, one choice at a time.